Hello, today it's the 19th of October 2024. We will be discussing Awaken to Love, chapter 1. We are like 18 people, some of us consented to be visually recorded. So let's take a moment, look through the book, the chapter, and raise your hand to begin the discussion. Yes, Terry?
I'm truly resonating with the Tao Te Ching. That beautiful, I really resonated with that it's really finding that place within ourselves that is source, that is that life force and awareness that's connected to all things, and that has the ability to love and love all the other parts that may feel sorrow, and the parts can rest in it, and the parts that, the mother part that can invite everything in. Just beautiful.
Terry, I wonder, would you like to read the quote? Or?
Yes, I would absolutely love to. In the beginning was the Tao, the Tao. All things issue from it. All things return to it. To find the origin, trace back the manifestations. When you recognize the children and find the mother, you will be free from sorrow. Tao Te Ching.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Are you complete?
Yep, that's the journey back to the whole of awakened life.
Totally. Thank you so much. Paul.
Yeah. I've just lost the page. Chapter 1. It's the quote which says, first paragraph, which I think is so. I actually thought we were on chapter 2 today because I missed last week. But anyway, I've read chapter 1 as well, sorry. But this modern culture especially has lost touch with humanity's inherent goodness. And this fertile ground of disconnection allows trauma to take root and proliferate. The major source of suffering, that's where the world is today. And yet trauma can also be a catalyst for profound surrender and awakening, a wake-up call. To letting go of the illusion of control and rediscovering our ever-present state of being. I just think that's just where we are in the world, really. Well, the first part. The second part is the awakening, and that we're called to be challenged to that. So, yeah.
Is that in chapter 2? I've missed
no,
that.
that's in chapter 1. That's the
chapter.
Oh no, sorry, that's in no. Sorry, I'm on the introduction. Sorry about that.
Oh, it's okay.
But
Don't worry at all.
It's still important. Sorry,
it's okay. It's fine. It's fine to go back to the introduction. So yeah.
I just thought that was so important because that's the way that's where the world is today. Anyway, yes. Yeah, so sorry.
Yeah, where are we? Can we just can you find the place where you?
That was the first paragraph of the introduction.
Okay. So where does it start?
Modern culture especially has lost touch with humanity's inherent goodness.
Yeah, modern culture especially has lost touch with humanity's inherent goodness. Got it.
Yeah. That's it. That.
Yeah, thank you.
In particular, yeah. So yeah.
That's brilliant. Thank you.
Sorry.
Let me know if you're complete or if you have a question around that.
I finished.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Okay, Anne?
Following on what Paul said, it just occurred to me maybe the very obvious thing that in a way, trauma is the appropriate response to a very ill culture, just like the myth of normal with Gabor Mate, like what he talks about in that book, but just the fact that we do have all these parts that come up and react and are, quote, being unhelpful, but in a way they're signaling. If they didn't, then we just accept like a really, really unhealthy and damaging and limiting and constraining world. And it's the fact that they're so vocal that we are able to recognize that things are not okay. So yeah, but I'm complete.
Yeah, thank you. Marlene?
Hello. Yes, I believe this is on page 20. It has to do, remember when we were talking about the therapist being the self for the client who may be blended? Well, this is interesting. As a child, it says the developing child psyche has to borrow the self, big self, of the caregiver. That's kind of ominous because the developing child, has a self, but maybe doesn't have access to it, but it has to rely on the self of the caregiver for self-energy. So if the caregiver is not a healthy person, if mom's not healthy, unfortunately, it's always mom. It says self is experienced not directly, but through projection. So we're taking on the mom self. Since she's with us, I think, more than dad is. This is a tender developmental period during which the ego-self relationship is vulnerable to wounding. The inner self, and this is of the child, becomes associated with the failures, rejections, and disappointments stemming from our caregivers. Wow. So we're taking on their parts, in essence, causing ego self-alienation, the point at which the ego splits from the self. And the self is more expansive than the ego. They describe the ego here as being more of a functional, day-to-day, taking care of life tasks. But the self includes the shadow, the archetypes. It's just way bigger. It's way more interesting than ego. Ego has its limitations. So I think that's interesting that we start off as little ones, taking on the self of the caretaker. And that resonates with me because I always go around laughing about it. And I say things like, I'm just like my mother. And I laugh about it because I don't want to be like my mother. So here is the answer to that. I say things like, I've inherited my mother's nervous system, which is in essence true. And thank you, I've spoken long enough and I am finished.
Thank you. And I kind of found the place here. The developing child's psyche has to borrow the self of the caregiver. Thus, self is experienced not directly, but through projection.
Very scary.
It is. It's so dependent on a caregiver. So I have a kind of question here. At the beginning, in the beginning of the chapter, it says that we are all born like in pure self. It is like it's an amazing state. We have all this awe and wonderment and curiosity, and we don't feel separate from the world. And then slowly we pick up all those burdens, and you should do this, you should do that. Like initially we're like an infant is non-judgmental, and then slowly we pick up those limitations, the traumas, the burdens from the society and from the mother. And but she does say there, like, if you live in a harmonious family environment, then you're likely that you will never have to go and see a therapist. You will never need support. And I wonder, because this to me seems a little bit conflicting. On one hand, she does mention that some people may grow up in very safe environments with safe attachments, secure attachments. And then she talks about the 7 veils. So yeah, those kind of burdens, the cardinal burdens. I need, if I can find me just for a quick second, because she said that we cannot escape. All of us will suffer from that.
It's on page 16.
Yeah, I do have it on Kindle here, and I'm like trying to let's see. Okay, here, the 7 veils. 1, powerlessness, helplessness. 2, terror, fear. 3, shame, guilt, humiliation. 4, betrayal, injustice. 5, grief, loss, hopelessness. 6, rejection, abandonment. 7, neglect, loneliness, unworthiness. And we're all gonna suffer from some of it, either a little bit or a lot. So does that mean that no one escapes? Do we all need IFS therapy in our life? I'm like, I don't know. What do you think about those 7 veils? Do you think that no one escapes, guys? What is your personal opinion? Yeah, Marlene, did you say something?
It's the human condition. No one escapes. And it's not on purpose either. We're going to experience these, but they're not done on purpose to us.
But I guess if you do have a secure attachment, you have a strong inner self, and you can cope so much better. So you may not need therapy, because she does mention, the people that do have those secure attachments may not need therapy. So Paul, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, I see it as on a spectrum. I mean, because the 4 attachment styles, there's actually ultimately the disordered attachment, which not everybody has. That disordered, that was the latest attachment style to be discovered. The first Bowlby discovered the first 3: secure, avoidant, and whatever I can't remember the other one. I was getting whatever the first 3 are.
Anxious,
avoidant, anxious, and then secure. But then the other one, disordered, came later. But not everybody has that disorder. It depends. It's all about your early your early attachment to your, like Marlene was saying, to your caregiver. So I see it on a spectrum.
yes.
But that we do all, but then that's about the attachment. But the other things, like, not everybody has a great deal, and some people have some neglect. Some might have a lot of neglect. It can all be, I don't know about all of those that are on a spectrum, but yeah, we all have, we're not all going to go through exactly the same as our hours.
Yeah. Can you look, guys, at the top of the page here, it says, we therapists do not tend to work with people like this because they don't especially benefit from therapy. That's a big claim. I get, so we're all on the spectrum. So if we're like, depends where you are on the spectrum. If you are high up on the spectrum, you may need that support. So thank you, Paul. Paul, you're complete?
Sorry, yeah, fine.
Thank you. Yes, who's next? Let me see. And who's next? I'm not sure. I need to check the, let's see.
I think
Christina? Is it? Christina?
Yes, I can't help but not mention a verse that I really like in the New Testament that says, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life, in the sense that the entire human condition is in a cry out for really an urge for love and unconditional love. And of course, if you have a mother or primary caregiver that can grant you that secure attachment, of course, you're less likely to suffer from all these 7 evils. And even so, just as you said, even if you can enjoy that secure attachment from your primary caregiver, you still somehow in a great need to be attached to a greater force of love to heal. And that is really, I believe, the God who reigns from heaven above with wisdom, love, and power. So this occurred to me when I read that part. And in fact, I did highlight that because it does speak volume to the fact that the entire human condition is in a great need for a loving force to be healed. Yes, thank you. That's all.
Thank you. That's brilliant. Thank you, Christina. Anne?
I had two things. I guess one comment was also there's the personality aspect. So I think even if someone has a really wonderful, secure attachment with parents, like one person could just have a much more naturally calm and self-regulating personality and not like an oversensitive imagination and prone to terror and horror and sensitivity that doesn't come from just attachment. They just might have such more sensitivity and specific needs. And so they'll be more prone to these veils, I guess. And I guess the only one I can see that I can imagine someone could go through life without experiencing any of them, but grief, I guess, unless they die before everyone else. That's the one that's really, really, really everyone has to go through. And then the question is, do they need IFS, or maybe it's just, a compassionate holding of the grief? And my second thing was, I don't think I agree with her that the child is born into self, because children don't have compassion when they grow. Like there's so many studies about how teenagers don't have the same empathy centers. They're unable to like think about other people's points of view. There's so many studies about children not having theory of mind. It grows at all these developmental stages. Also, regulation is we don't have calm naturally. Babies are, very obviously are completely dysregulated unless, they're consoled from the outside. So it's that for me is a little bit of a glib, like, oh, we all just like so perfect, but we need to learn these things. So yeah, I'm complete.
Oh my God, Anne, that's so true. And, and kind of like I have a part that holds this, that children are so innocent, and if you meet their needs, they will be calm and wonderful. And when you say child, you can't stop but love it, with its sense of wonderment. But yeah, on the other hand, they are always, they're dysregulated for a lot of the time. They don't have the theory of mind, as you said. Oh my God, are totally, they can't see other people's point of view. So yeah, wow. Terry, yes.
Yes. Let's see, are we still on page? This line here, it's so great. It's nearly page 17. You're on it.
Yeah.
Just a huge statement. It is nearly impossible to reach adulthood without encountering all 7 veils to some degree, ranging from subtle homeopathic traces to overwhelming catastrophes that flood the psyche. These veils act as a trance-inducing glue. I'll go back to that part. That binds parts of ourselves in frozen states, severing our connection to the present moment and wholeness. So, what came through as such a beautiful truth, the present moment and our wholeness, that it is here that we can have the present moment. Our wholeness is in the present moment. If we can try to be with the present moment, for me, then that's where I can be in self and see that I am in a part or self. And then I can move from the foreground to the background of that loving, unconditional, positive state of grace and wholeness. And I have that choice to back up into that space rather than identify with the pain or the burden, and can lovingly embrace that part of the human experience in myself and others from that state of compassion and hold it with love. If I'm in the parts, then I'm in trance. So it means really slowing down, being present with my breath, creating a calm space rather than in the pace of this world, and really being aware of my breathing. And I liked what you said about taking a breath count of 6 into the heart space. That a lot of the thoughts, a lot of the emotions are so fast that it moves us into the past or into a future projection or something so fast that we get lost in a trance, and it's hard to get back to center. But to slow it down, because the world is acting in beta, very alert, aware, being on top of the waves, being thrown all about. But the deeper we go into the ocean, that depth of the unconscious collective unconscious, which has that state of goodness and love at the beginning of creation. If we go back to source, there is love and wholeness. And I do believe that it said that we can, even in the state, while in prenatal conditions, we may not be in a state of serenity. It may be chaotic even in our unborn states, or bringing stuff to it. But as long as we all know that we come from creation itself, the first, which is an act of goodness, then we can return back to that. But it's not in time. It's kind of a timeless state. It was nice to see it here, and it's nice to see the spiritual solution in this too. Going back to love, choosing that state. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Wow, a lot of wisdom in what you said. Loved it. Thank you. Wow. Yes, thank you. Marie?
Yeah, that was quite deep and profound. Thank you, Terry. That was beautifully said. I just wanted to respond to Anne's comment around, she disagreed about being born in pure self. And I actually feel like that's not, I need to reread it again, but my interpretation was that she was just giving different options. Like, I don't feel like she's set in that, because the first paragraph, she was talking about, some psychologists that believe that you're born in complete immersion of self. But then if you scroll down to the bottom of the page, she then talks about how another psychologist says that we actually are born with parts. So the top part says we're born in pure self. Then the second part says that we're born with our parts. And then if you turn the page, she says, and then another psychologist has revealed that maybe our parts started forming even before birth. So it's actually feels to me like no one really knows, including her.
Well, can I say something here? Like, I think, Marie, you're complete, yeah?
Yeah, I'm complete.
Yeah.
And I was kind of left confused, because I was like, well, which one is it? And I'm like, well, maybe we just have to sit with the we don't know.
Yes, we don't know. And I do think she does present a lot of points of view. She does say, like Dick Swart says, children don't have full access to self. They're vulnerable. And they learn they need their caregivers. And even though they can do some kind of trauma work themselves, they do need external help. They don't have their sense of self is not fully developed because of the developmental stage. Now, one little thing I want to say is, yes, children and infants, even in the belly of their mom, they have parts. Dick Swart said also, I'm pretty sure he says that we all have parts, but they're not burdened. They get burdened along the way when needs are not met. She talks about needs in this chapter as well. When needs are not met, there's big trouble. So that's what I want to share. And BB, yeah.
Oh, hi, thank you. I think what I was going to bring up for myself and my parts has already just been shared and expressed. And I think it was that sort of beginning reading that we read out that supports it. But yeah, I mean, obviously, in the conception of the impregnation is where I sort of start. And I even come from further than that, but I'm unconscious of it and not conscious of it. So when I'm born, in that moment of birth, I have so many needs for nurturance that I look to my parents or caregivers as gods. And I only have a short period of time to be in that state of, I suppose, some form of learning. And then by the time I reach a certain age of 3 or 4 or 5, it's then just constantly repeated. There's nothing new. So that's when I have to learn about unburdening and polarization and parts and my legacy and attached cultural and spiritual hand-me-downs. So yeah, it's just a tip of an iceberg. It reminds me of my favorite song, The Cosmic Dancer. Why do I have to dance at 7? Why do I have to dance at 5? Why did I have to dance so young as I came out of my mother's womb? Yeah, very spiritual. Thank you.
Thank you so much, BB. Thank you. I'm going to read a little bit around this, what like BB talked about, a little bit about this concept of individuation. She says individuation refers to the process of developing a mature, authentic sense of self, distinct but not separate from others. Caregivers must facilitate individuation by meeting certain developmental needs, such as Winnicott's holding need, providing a nurturing presence for self-discovery, Kohut's mirroring need, affirming one's value and creativity, idealizing need, providing admirable role models, and twinship need, feeling connected to others. But what happens when the needs are not met? When they're unmet, individuals experience wounds, psychological wounds. And then that leads to a lifelong need to find others to fulfill those unmet developmental needs. Yes. Oh. And then the problems begin. So yeah, is Terry?
Yes, hi. What was the page that we were just on before it moved? There was something that rang so beautifully. It was about the ego.
Oof, I wish.
Okay. Yes. But
oh, I'm not sure where we were.
I think it was the one before this. It was 17, I think. 18. Yeah. Thank you, Mark. Page 18.
Page 18 says, on Kindle?
Yeah, I think, yeah, page 18. Okay, let's see. There's something here. I think it's the one before that, maybe 17. It's in my head. Let's see. Okay. Young children. Nope, that's not it. See, it's with, well, anyway, what I can't find. It's
yeah.
the one about the ego surrendering to self. Oh, here it is.
Yeah.
Okay. A key part of inner work for adults is to reunite the ego and parts with self in such a way that the ego surrenders to the self as the benevolent leader of the inner psyche. By realigning the ego to follow the guidance of our true core self, wholeness and integration can be achieved. Okay, for me recently, and in that present moment, as I've said, which I'm constantly trying to move from that beta wave, our natural brain state when we're awake, to surrender to an alpha state that's actually slower, that's more integrated, that's more open, less fast. Now, the ego is something I notice when I'm in my breath and I'm in a calm, open state of grace. That state of grace can watch for whatever hits into it, you know, whether it's something somebody says, then all of a sudden, boom, thoughts go off. So there are parts of myself that are hardened, whereas the ego is, the state of grace, or that self with the capital S, is open and aware. What I'm feeling, and I felt in the 12 steps is that my ego is bowing and says, I don't know best. I surrender to a higher power. So there's this opening. And when the ego surrenders, and this identity, or even me in this lifetime called Terry, says, I know I don't know, I yield. I return back to wholeness. I bow to a love I don't completely understand. Higher, take all of me. Do with what thou wilt with me. And I trust in you. Suddenly we're trusting in what Jung calls that unconscious collective of goodness, that we can trust the ones before us in that intention that the collective consciousness is trying to tell us in this moment. So we're open to it. So if we're in that state, it becomes that, thank you, Gracia, I see the reminder. It becomes that ocean of goodness that we can step into and rest in and yoke with. This is what I'm noticing. We step in union with that self or unconscious collective, or spirit, God, nature, whatever you want to call it. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Terry. Paul?
Yeah, I just wanted to go about what you mentioned there. I was going to talk about that paragraph that you mentioned, Vana, about the individuation, and because it mentions Winnicott, and I'm big on Winnicott, and there's he talks about there's the need, because it's, what was it said there about the holding need, providing a nurturing presence for self-discovery. And there's a wonderful book called The Piggle, which is his analysis of a girl who's 2 to the age of 5. And she actually seems to be what we might call depression. You won't believe that and he provides through play, because he obviously with a child, it's about play. It's not about sitting down and talking like we do in therapy. So there's that. And he also talks about the good enough parent. So it's not asking for ideal parents. It's for a parent to be good enough. So there's that. But what he provides is I suppose we'd say in IFS terms, the self that understands the child, that can play, through play, understand what the child is expressing. So she was because she had a sister that was born and she went into depression and and by the age of 5, she was whatever normal means for it's difficult to put that word on anybody. But then, and now she's a psychotherapist. She can't remember any of that. back then, but it adjusts you. But the other thing I was going to say as well is the dysfunction of, like that quote from earlier, the dysfunction of society, the trauma of society. The other thing is John Bowlby wrote some papers called The 40 Thieves. Well, I was going to say, well, Winnicott, actually, I mean, I've got the book here, Deprivation and Delinquency. He analyzes what makes people become dysfunctional in society. And John Bowlby wrote a paper called The 40 Thieves, or 44 Thieves. And it's about, and you look at all of those kids of various ages who were in trouble with the law, and they all had dysfunction in earlier childhood. So it's that just spreads out into society, and the need for the healing of the childhood dysfunction. So yeah, it's just that. Yeah, so it's just that just wanted to mention that. Thanks.
It is, gosh, it is strange. I don't know how I feel about it, because it does look like, I watched some interviews with inmates, and it looks like everything stems from the family. So it's like, do we have to blame our parents for everything?
I like the words doing blameless inventories. We don't have to blame them, but we can still inventory around what we've inherited or the things that we need to unburden, IFS terms. There's that wonderful with Derek Scott, and one of his things on YouTube when he does that series, I think it's Derek Scott, interviews that guy who murdered his wife. Yeah. There's that interview there, and the whole parts that are at work with this inmate. You know, that was fascinating. But yeah, I think that I won't say blame. I think we can inventory and do the IFS work on the unburdening. It doesn't have to be blaming. My view of my stuff with my parents anyway. So yeah, thanks.
Great, thank you, Paul. Excellent. Yeah, Bibi.
Oh, hi. I just wanted to complete, because I was so grateful that you went to that chapter to fulfill my share. And I just noticed something before you, just as you stopped, and I was like hoping you'd read it out, because of I think what I've just heard again is the self-actualization through a process of integrating the conscious and the unconscious, coming from Jungian terms. And Jungian obviously was a pupil of Freud, and a co-worker collaborating with Nietzsche and Walker and many others before they were even born. And that self-actualization just fits so well into the diagram that we're dancing around of the P's and the F's as a way to get into the C's, a little bit like peeling the onion and having nothing in the center, or finding that center of the onion, or however one wants to look at it. I just thought that was, for me, I like the concept that, like, now I have a 9th C that seems to be talked about of choice. I can choose, and I totally agree with the last comment. I can blame the universe and the world for all my problems, but when I turn it around and just hold things accountable for things, it all becomes so much easier. Self-actualization with my trailheads and my steps, and six and seven, the forgotten steps, and so on. So yeah, lovely. Thanks.
Thank you. Bibi, just a quick question. When you're talking about C's and P's, you're talking about the qualities of the self. Is that right?
The way to find compassion and curiosity, the way to find C's is I use the IFS structure of the 8 P's and the F's, 5 F's, or I might have got the numbers wrong, but yeah, the journey to finding that inner child again, that inner sanctuary where I am whole, I am one, I am the center of my own self-actualizing universe.
And what about the F's? What is that? Oh, the 6 Fs?
They're just the format. If you go to that little diagram in the chapter, I can't think of it for now.
Yeah.
It's I find, I focus,
Yeah, fine. Yeah, the 6 Fs. Yeah, for
yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. Flesh out, focus, find the
Yeah.
fear, befriend. Yeah, got it.
Persistence, perseverance,
Playfulness, presence. Yeah.
yeah. And it leads me to that compassion and curiosity as I had as a child, where and now I'm having my nervous single, my vagal is just opened up, and I'm sort of in that Kundalini self-actualization part, because I have I don't blame anything today. It allows me to go into the onion. It becomes my own center. I can be my own center.
I love it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. You know, I did have a little bit of an internet glitch, so I'll read this. What Bibi just mentioned. I'll read it one more time. In Jungian terms, individuation is the achievement of self-actualization through a process of integrating the conscious and the unconscious. That's the one I missed before. Thank you. Anne.
Yeah, I love what Bibi said about the self-actualization being integrating with the Fs, Ps, and Cs. I wanted to add more to the interesting things that Paul had mentioned. So I guess maybe I'll go backwards. So the whether it's to blame all the parents, I mean, it's definitely not. It's both, right? Because when they study like psychopathy or the mass murderers, not all psychopaths who have a certain brain structure with less empathic structures, it's not that they all have the most horrible parents, but then it's like if you have a brain structure that's less tendency toward empathy, and that doesn't mean they're worse, because they could have more, courage, they could have more adventure, they could have these other very, useful for society in terms of human variety. They could have qualities that are, that we need in our diverse pool of people. But then some like qualities, maybe the more aggressive qualities, which we as humans, it helps us forge new ground. It helps us, challenge like new ways and also overcome authorities that are bad. That those qualities, if they're like too much, or if they encounter bad parents, then that can cause like further violence. And they've identified like the violence gene, which is not this, that doesn't mean someone's going to become violent. It means if they are violently abused, then they're much, much more likely to continue that abuse. It does. And then people without that gene, if they are violently abused, they are more likely to not, continue that abuse. And I guess it's easy to think like, oh, well, then the violent people are worse. But I think it's just it's a different like slant on the qualities that we have. Yes, and then so tons of people have had the worst parents and they don't go on to do these horrible things because, for whatever reason. Maybe you can say it's other things in their experience. It could also just be something about their nature that like leans them more toward, something more passive or more gentle or whatever it is. And then the quick other thing about the good enough mother. So the interesting thing is the good enough mother is actually better than the perfect mother. And so that kind of because it actually gives you the opportunity to learn imperfection and have to deal with this, 15% chance. I think they put this 85% good number. And you want to learn how to deal with things when it's not perfect, when your mom isn't there, when your mom is too tired or slightly dysregulates, and then repair, and the importance of like going through, positive repair with the person. And it just made me think like going through the 7 veils, it's like if someone goes through life and doesn't have the veils, and that's great. And then all of a sudden, like they're like in their middle age and like a horrible war comes, or they encounter like a really bad person in a way they've never encountered before, then that could be just very distressing if they didn't have like a little bit of, difficulty to learn on the way, depending on the person.
My God. Yes.
I'm complete.
Oh, thank you so much. Oh my God. Now I've got a metaphor. It's like you need to go to the gym, and when you lift weight, you tear up the muscle, and that's how the muscle gets stronger by damaging it. So we need a little bit of misfortune or whatever, adversity, a bit of training.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And another thing I'm thinking about is the good enough mother. So yes, we don't really need a perfect mother. We need a good enough mother. Like we need some access to self, not we need what's called what's the name, guys? What Dixon says, the access to self, the critical mass, critical something. Who remembers that? Is it critical mass to
Critical mass of
Yeah,
self-energy.
that's correct.
yeah, we need access to critical mass of self, not full access to self. Even a little bit of access to self might be good enough or adequate. And gosh, one tiny little thing, and I agree with you, Anne, is like, is it nature or nurture? What's going on? And it's both. In Tom Holmes' book, we had the book club, somebody else is running with Tom Holmes, and I was just listening to the audiobook, and he says children who are introverted are very different to the extroverted children. If the mom says, no, don't touch the hot stove, the introverted child will hear that no really loudly in their head. But the extroverted child will be like, she's like shouting no, oh no. And it's going to be more like, oh yeah, it's not a big problem. It's like extroversion is okay. People expressing themselves loudly is fine. And then don't internalize that no in the same way. They don't tend to anyway. In the same way that introverted children internalize. So that brings me to my situation, because I am the extroverted child. My sister's the introverted, and she always listened. I never did. It's my genes. It's my DNA. It's not me. Okay, we can go further into that, Oh, you have a part that's extroverted. Maybe I have other parts that are introverted, and then it gets really complex and confusing. Okay, and I will leave this conversation here. I do have one more little thing to ask, is about non-duality. How you guys, notice? Do you notice non-duality in this chapter or anywhere else? This is my kind of curiosity. Yeah, thank you. And Terry.
Yes, I think what I'm sensing, if I'm feeling this out with my parts that are non-duality, is that myself and parts are one and the same. They're connected. One rests in the other, and the others rest in the other in harmony, so that we see each other. So the parts all see as being part of one ego, all the polarized parts, and therefore can neutralize each other and relax back, because they see that neither one is correct, but they can reduce that energy into being something more life-giving than life-taking and tension and constricting and isolating and bullying on the inside, as well as we do on the outside. So once we see that each other is the same, and I wrote something in the chat that, that if we're able inside ourselves to forgive our parts and have them forgive each other, that forgiving others and ourselves, even on that level, is the pathway of peace in freeing ourselves and others. It makes sense of the senseless. I see you, Marlene. You're shaking your head. You got it too. Yeah, I love your smile. Ding. Thanks.
Anne, thank you. Yeah.
I had noticed the non-duality when in our initial meditation, when she's had the meditation like rest into the non-duality of self. But like, I guess I actually I didn't want to be pedantic, but then I was like, wait, we spent so much time last week talking about this duality and how she wasn't saying self was just non-dual, that also had one unity, like particle factors, and she has a whole paragraph on how self is both particle and wave, and then all of a sudden it's like self, just the wave part of self. And so I guess also I would just highlight that there is the aspect of noticing our parts and realizing their function and their good intentions, that they are looking out for needs, even if their strategies weren't like the most helpful. They had like a particular need, you know, not just a, oh, everything's all fine and they can just be like quiet, you know. It's like, oh, they actually were looking out for something that we can celebrate. That's part of our individual, unique, and yeah, human needs. And I guess that, I think, is more particle aspect of self, that the self can celebrate that, celebrate the unique needs of each part and appreciate them for trying to look out for that. I'm complete.
Thank you. I'm gonna raise my hand. It's not easy for me to use the emojis, guys. Multitasking here. Just around the meditations, I find it interesting that the first meditation is about finding self compassion, finding self. She says, sense yourself as a wise, compassionate inner guide. If you find this difficult, imagine self as a vast open expanse, like a clear, boundless sky. Your parts are like clouds passing through this sky. And I find it interesting that she, as a first exercises, she focuses on the qualities of the self. I'm not used to this kind of approach. Normally we go straight to like, okay, let's go inside. What parts do you notice? Let's get to know the part. How do you feel towards the part? Okay, it's a very kind of like, it feels really different. And initially I was like a little bit like, wow, what is that? And now I kind of like and possibly prefer her approach. That, you know, let's see what is self like, and given those beautiful metaphors to understand self, I love it. I love that she comes, you know, she presents this exercise first, understanding what self feels like, or how does it manifest. And then her second exercise, she goes into getting to know parts. And that was actually also a brilliant exercise. I loved what, you know, towards the end, let me find the part, and I think it was absolutely wonderful. Okay. I can't. So I know, okay. Here. So you find the part. If the part is present in one area of your body, can you move it and embody it in a different way? For example, if it's primarily a thinking part, can you give it physical expression through gestures or sensations in the body? And if it's usually silent, can you give it a voice to express itself? It feels a little bit like psychodrama, like, you know, a bit like direct access. And it is wonderful, I think, to give space to the parts to really embody that, you know, to really show up in the way they want, in a more maybe dramatic way, to allow it to really fully blossom. I'm not sure how to explain it, but I liked her approach. And also, just a little before, I really loved this question. Notice if this part seems attached to or identified with someone in your external family, your mom, dad, brother, sister. Wow, I have a part that is attached to my mom and also identifies with the qualities of the mom. So which is like, why, like, you know, if I have a part that feels a little bit of anxiousness, okay, why does it like go to mom for support, and also sees that my mom has got also this part? It's like, wow, I am attached and I identify with, which is like, wow, it's quite an interesting approach to think how the family, what is the family dynamic and how it affects your parts. Guys, I am curious. Did you like the exercises? Because we've done them in the group. So how did you think of is there something that stood out for you? Yeah, Bibi?
So I appreciate your welcoming me here and how new I am to your book group, but I just needed to say that I identify with what you shared, and it was listening to Robert Faulkner the other day about the spirituality concept, the self concept in therapy and in other models and things that could give me the space to grieve and be held. And I just, yeah, so it's wonderful to be able to have the essence of my exterior family and friends and culture within me, and it not be such a detrimental thing as it used to be. Again, sort of appreciating self more. Thank you.
Thank you so much, baby. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you. And Terry.
Yeah. I'm going to put my hand down because I was distracted for a moment. So I lost track of thought.
Okay, okay, that's fine. Guys, as we're coming to a close, is anything else anyone else would like to share before we close the, yeah, Marlene?
Yes, I think it speaks to overcoming the limitations of the caretaker by transcending the, going from individuation to transcendence, which is the wave concept. He says that parts relax when they sense that interconnectedness, the non-duality of we're all interconnected, we're all part of a whole, and that soothes the tensions of maybe inheriting mom's nervous system, and being able to find what was missing through transcendence and through groups like these. That's another form of transcendence for me. Thank you. I
Oh
am
my
done.
God. Yeah, thank you. Okay. Here is something about non-duality. She talks about, I think, in the meditations. From this more spacious perspective, we can become the observer, witnessing the part in the present moment and appreciating its unique qualities while simultaneously remaining grounded in our being. By illuminating our parts with self's non-dual awareness. This kind of awareness never kind of changes, it's there. It's always, it's a steady kind of energy. By illuminating our parts with self's non-dual awareness, we start to understand their origins, beliefs, and motivations. Getting to know our wounded parts in this way begins their healing process. And even before getting to the wounded parts, but getting to know our protectors, I think that also begins the healing process. With compassionate awareness, we build trust and transform our inner family. Yeah, Anne?
I'm following this course where they teach the love and kindness meditation over 5 weeks, and I really appreciate, because what happens is a lot of people sit down and they cannot feel compassion. They don't feel kind. And it's very common to sit down to these meditation space and just feel like rage or anger, or just like so much of this stuff erupts when you're finally giving space. And what I love about the way it's taught is like, they say, they allow for all the reactions that can come. They say, well, you might not feel love or any kindness or anything. You're just giving the intention to sit down and make room with an intention towards this, but doesn't mean you have to feel that. And I think with these kinds of things, it's beautiful to be able to sit down and access the spacious self. And then, but I can imagine, because it's not really qualified, that a lot of times we sit down and it doesn't feel spacious at all, I mean, the last thing from it. And it really is, it's not so simple as that, it's really needs to be qualified with like, this is our intention, and to like believe that it's there, but just to make room for whatever is present. And it might not feel very spacious at all. And then actually give a lot more tools and specific techniques for how to relate to the moment when spaciousness doesn't just come, like a...
Wow, yes. Wow, yes. I have one little thing that in the book, it talks about disembodiment, dissociation, and the body fills up with this kind of compact energy, and trauma fills up with parts. And then you don't really, often if there's a lot of trauma, you don't have access to the body. You have this kind of separation from the body, but not in a, because as a child, you want to, parts want to protect self, and self is like, it's as if it's self is looking from the outside into the body. Yeah, Terry?
Yes, I mean, I went to the ultimate body awareness, which is chronic pain, where the body was really trying to get my attention. I mean, in severe pain, like unable to see, unable to talk, unable to hear, like really uncomfortable in my body. So embodiment was very, very, very hard. I mean, being, that it was full identification with the body of pain. So, I mean, dissociation was more comforting, and isolation even more so, but it really spins my whole existence off from any kind of connection. Combine it with numbing through whatever it is. You want to call it TV, Netflix, you want to call it alcohol, you want to call it whatever. But what I have found that I have embodied pain to the nth degree, that even looking at the pain, that it's so important to have the intellect. This has been my process. I'm not in pain right now, guys. So I'm in the different experience. I am presently experiencing can't even call it, I'm not experiencing multiplicity, because it's not just non-duality, it's multiplicity of parts. But like, I am embracing the parts, and the parts are embracing me right now, including the pain parts. And they've actually settled down. I came into here with a lot of facial, neck, shoulder, and left pain. And what I have found, that I've been come down into the heart space, back into the body, not just the mind, the higher parts of our cortex that think they rule in judgment. Well, I think, but down, kind of dropping, and then leaning back into the heart space and relaxing the body has been a way to unify the whole. And I think our culture is think, do, more. And that's half the problem, is that insanity. So cutting back our overuse of energy is really important, because I also have gone into the collapse mode. So the necessity of my pain, the necessity of fatigue has really been my prison that has led me to freedom from self-bondage. I've seen what my system has done. And but it's also forgiving, but stepping out of that judgment. So the intellect also has to really surrender. I got an intellect, even everything kind of surrenders to the heart space, and thinking yourself out of things can give you the idea, but the practice is different, of dropping into self. It is grounding. It is come back out of your head into your heart space. And that the only way to do it is to be with the natural flow of your breath. I can only give you an anchor, is the breath, not changing it, being with it and seeing what it wants to do. Get on board with your breath. That's how I've been able to come out of chronic pain, with the help of other people's love and holding the space for me in an unjudgmental, completely loving way.
Oh,
Thank you.
wow.
I love you.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Terry. That's absolutely brilliant. I'm noticing my breath right now as you were speaking. Oh, wow. That's brilliant. Thank you. Marlene?
Yeah, that was beautiful. I like the phrase parts trance, TRANCE, trance. Seeing the world through the narrow lenses of our wounded parts, instead of through self, which has a panoramic perspective. I like that contrast between the narrow lens of all my blended parts and then the self, which is so panoramic and expansive. And the parts trance happens as the child gets, takes on the burdens that are intergenerational. And so now we're in a parts trance. I
Yeah,
love that. Thank
I love
you.
that. I love that so much. I do hypnosis, and with hypnosis, we always, we hypnotists know that you don't hypnotize anyone, but you take them out of their trance. You dehypnotize, because like the smoking trance, the wherever the alcohol trance, that is a trance with its beliefs. It's your mind has got this kind of narrow perspective, and it's like, how can you dehypnotize, take the person out of this trance? How can they wake up? So I love that, Marlene. This is also my favorite word, the trance. That parts keep you glued to this. They keep you glued. So it's like a super glue. You are super glued to that trance. And one last little thing, just to because I found the piece about the disembodiment. I would like to read it quickly. And it's just like here, she says in chapter 1, people disembody for any number of reasons, but trauma tops the list. When you face a particular trauma, your parts mistakenly believe that they need to protect yourself. So they push yourself out of your body, which is why so many trauma survivors describe watching themselves being hurt from outside, and usually above their bodies. Thereafter, your protectors come to fear re-embodiment because they remain frozen in the trauma scene and believe you are the age you were when the trauma happened. So they often think they're protecting a very young being. And burdens, so the burdens you accrue from the trauma seem to be dense energy in this inner world, and they take up a lot of space inside. So not only is the self disembodied by these other kinds of energies, make it harder for you to re-embody. And as a result, most of us live in a less than fully embodied way, which means we are not bringing optimal levels of self-leadership to our inner and outer worlds. Sorry, that was quite a long thing. But yeah. Terry?
Yeah, an observation that I have that that we can also re-embody, and it can be very painful experience, going through the parts, but that we can have such identification with the body too, because we have a body, but that we can also mistake ourselves for our body. Have that, when
Yeah.
it is still a vehicle,
Yes.
for us, and it's the vessel and it experiences it, but
Vessel. Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
more than just the body, but we do
More.
take the body through it.
Yeah.
With us. But it's amazing how in this experience, this present moment that I have right now, my body doesn't have to be identified with pain and suffering in the body, and therefore I'm not. It's a huge
Love it.
shift experience now. But it's easy for me to go off beam, like kind of off, off into habit or off into the way I used to believe. I used to think things differently with my own thinker, but now with this experience
Yeah.
of being in self, being in the source itself, the body can be in it too. So it's not as limited. It's kind of connected to the life-giving force. I think
Oh, wow.
that if we
It's
can
like,
work from that place, it can be really, really special to all our parts and each other from that open-hearted space, that has the ability to be vulnerable and strong at the same time and loving. It's like the same way, it's brings to mind, nature. You ever feel that coherence when you're out at the beach or the forest, or you're just one with it, and it's just a beautiful cohesiveness. You know, sometimes you can feel that, sometimes not, depending on your state. It's really something else, but that clarity is such a beautiful part. That clarity, I think that really tells us when we're in the big S, or that big expansive view. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Guys, oh my God, that's brilliant. That's a lot. Self is infinite, is transcendent, is amazing. And we have come to a close. Thank you so much for participating and for being here and sharing in your own way, or listening, or messaging in the chat. I will stop the recorded portion and we can move on to some private time if you want.